but you never know.
I have no objections.
Okay. Thank you for agreeing to allowing us to record this coaching supervision session. I was asking if anyone had a case. I remember the last time we met, came together, the majority of us. Now, I guess you had something, but does anybody else have an issue, case, or something that they'd like to bring? Think about it. Well, why don't we do this? Let's have a few minutes to sort of just relax and think and center ourselves. And maybe something will come forth or come through. Yes? Okay. So I'd like you to close your eyes, be comfortable, feet on the floor, and take a deep breath, inhaling and exhaling through your mouth. Take a deep breath again, inhaling and exhaling. One more time, inhale deeply as possible and exhale. Become comfortable with the silence. Listen and feel your breath and your heart beating. And when you're ready, slowly come back into the room, into our space. So now, does anybody have anything they would like to focus on?
I'm happy to start, Sunny, and not sure how much time this will take, but would love your wise counsel. A relatively new client.
Can you hold up for one moment, Nagesh?
Sure.
What I want to ask before we do that, Reggie was not here, but we did the fishbowl format the last time. Are you comfortable with that, Nagesh? And I'll briefly explain to Reggie, have you experienced a fishbowl format in supervision?
I have, and I would appreciate you just briefing that.
Reviewing it.
Thank you.
What will happen here is Nagesh will give us a minute or two of a summary of the case or the issue, and then he will go off camera. And Michelle, Sylvia, you and I will do a round, probably of clarification and questions, and put that into this space. And that will go for perhaps another 2-3 minutes, with each one of us giving or putting into space our questions or what we need clarity on. We will bring Nagesh back, and he will have the option of responding to each one of the individuals or the group in general, or nothing at all. Depends on what he would like to offer. Then he will go off camera again, and we will do another round. Same thing, and he will come back. Probably by the third round, we'll actually move towards concluding. And I will be asking all of you your takeaway, especially Nagesh, to give us feedback. Okay. All right. Thank you. Any questions before we get started? Okay. Nagesh, thank you.
Thank you, Sunny. So this is a relatively new client, a medical resident in his fourth year of medical residency. And so we started sessions about 4 weeks ago. And I noticed that even starting from the first session, didn't feel like I was connecting. And so all the things we have learned, trying to create a safe space, being empathetic, tried that. And we did 2 more sessions, after which this person said, I think if, I don't need coaching anymore. And the person who introduced me to this client indicated, and what the client was talking about seemed, at least from my perspective, something that coaching could potentially help. So out of curiosity, I requested kind of an exit interview, if you will, to say your advice, your feedback would really help in terms of learning and future clients and so on. And he said something that I think surprised me. You said I was intimidated by you. And so I don't feel like, I can be myself. And the person who introduced me did not mention anything about my background or what I worked or where I worked and what I did. So one part of it is, of course, this person could Google me and see some part of my background. But, I think the question I'm trying to explore is, how should I present myself? Whether it's what we say in our webpage, in our bio, or whatever background they see. And if in fact the client feels like that he, she, or they, don't feel comfortable. And, some of you know me well. I wrongly assume that I'm relatively, hopefully I listen carefully, try to create a safe space. So there's surprise and also the desire to say, I wish to learn out of it.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you have a relatively new client, and you've had a few sessions with this person who is a fourth-year medical student, and recently
resident. Sorry, fourth resident, yeah.
And recently, he expressed that he didn't feel he needed the coaching, the client, and eventually communicated to you that he felt intimidated when you had kind of an exit session or exit interview. And what you would like from us today is to help you explore, support you in exploring what it is that could have contributed to this in terms of your image, marketing, or whatever. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that accurate, Nagesh?
That could be one part of it, and I'm actually really eager to kind of hear what does one do, right? I mean, we are who we are. There's information out there about us. You do your best to present. So what are some things that I could do? What are some others could do if they're in a similar situation? Even in the midst of perception, right? I'm perceiving that I'm creating a safe space, and clearly that's not what the person got.
So you'd like us to help you explore that so that you can be more in alignment with what you'd like to represent and what potential clients are also perceiving about you.
Yes, please.
So can you go off camera now? And each one of us will take a minute or so to ask any clarifying questions or just put in the space what it is you need to further support Nagesh whenever you're ready.
I would be curious to know what preamble, what introduction was made from the individual that referred Nagesh. Because it sounds like there was some, obviously for the client, there were some things either missing or unknown. Yeah, obviously the stage wasn't set, not quite sure how the stage was set, but for the client to be comfortable. So I would be curious to know what transpired prior to their meeting.
I can also ask, I can go next. Sunny, are we allowed to ask more than one question like last time?
Well, I think it's helpful if we limit, if it's a compound question, keep
Okay.
your input to about a minute, please.
Sure,
Mhm.
sure. Yeah, Nagesh said he was surprised. So I'm wondering how that actually felt, and like what made him be surprised? Was this unexpected, and did this not happen before, or did it happen before in other settings or other areas, other relationships with other clients? So what brought on that surprise? Yeah, and then how that actually felt in his body and emotionally.
I have a two-part curiosity. The first is currently, Nagesh, what is your, not marketing strategy, but who do you see yourself coaching now? And the second part is, who do you see yourself coaching in the future? But is there a certain population or industry that you see yourself supporting?
This is very interesting for me because I don't know, when we first started this session, I jokingly made a comment about Nagesh's picture, which we can all see now. And the message I was getting from that look was like, I don't remember exactly what I said. It was something like, I got your number. There was a seeing, a knowingness in the expression that he has on his face. And none of us can see ourselves as other people see us. I'm just wondering too, if this is a one-off situation, kind of piggybacking on what Sylvia said, you know, there's not always going to be a fit, I think, in coaching. And I'm just wondering whether, as Sylvia asked, if this has happened in the past, or perhaps there is a need for more input, feedback, you know, on, but it might be the client's issue and not Nagesh's issue too. So I don't know. I'm wondering, you know, where this is coming from. Anybody have anything additional that they'd like to add before we bring Nagesh back?
I do have one more thing that I wanted to ask. When Nagesh was starting to talk about this case and how he was surprised, he also right away brought up background. So is this back? He said the client did not mention background, but what made him bring up background? Like what is the internal dialogue that he had with himself when this was brought up? So maybe background was one of the things, but anything else, and why background?
Nagesh, when you're ready, please join us again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for those really insightful questions. You know, Reginald, the friend who made the contact essentially told the client that the coach is also from the healthcare context or works in healthcare, and so potentially could be of benefit. And in the contracting, of course, I didn't, you know, this connects, Sylvia, to the background pieces. I am a professor in a school of medicine. I've been doing that for a long time. So is this, medical resident professor, which is, unfortunately, sometimes a dynamic that's not always positive, right? Which kind of made me think about that. But in the contracting was more about what the client's needs were, right? And where he wished to go. We talked about 6 sessions, what he wanted to get in the 6 sessions, things that I think one would do in the contracting piece. So I think in the coaching context, I'm a relatively new coach, maybe now I could say 2-3 years. This hasn't happened before, right? So the surprise was that, one part of it was, trying our best to create a safe place and be connected. And so the person's response, I was very happy that he actually felt honest to tell me, because the other part of what I was thinking is how many clients may not tell us and may stop and, not be intimidation, but could be anything else. So and in my, what I felt was my heart sank, because I grew up in a cultural context where you're supposed to be other-centered, humble, kind, be there for others. And I try my best, though I know that my background, people have, okay, yeah, your PhD, your whatever, med school. I ask people to call me by my first name. And so, yeah, so that's going to surprise me, but I really felt like, oh my God, my heart really sank. Michelle, marketing strategy wise, I had a website that I pulled down because I felt like it didn't really do what I wanted it to do, or who I am. And this is with my wife, partner Samia. So we decided we'll redo it at another time. So actually right now, I don't have a long list of clients. I have a few, or actually executives in the corporate context. I was really excited about this client because I do want to coach in the healthcare context. And so to be there for whether it's a student or a healthcare provider, administrator, leader. So that's the other piece, is saying, okay, in the healthcare context, then is this one-off, or is this something that I need to reflect on a little bit more? So you're right, Sunny, we can't see ourselves. And like you said, it could be the client's issue. And you could say, yes, this may not be one where you and the client connect. It's not a good fit. And that's kind of the rationale I've been using to say, probably this client is better served by somebody where he feels comfortable, right? But the other side of it as a lesson is to say coach's role is to create the safe place. And what do you do if people perceive you a certain way? Yeah, so Sylvia, the background piece of it was, and I didn't mention, but he could have clearly gone online and see what my background is in terms of what I do. Anything else that I didn't answer from? And these are all really, really useful questions.
Thank you, Nagesh. Anything else that you'd like to put in the space before Nagesh goes off again? I have one clarification. Did the client, Nagesh, actually say to you that he didn't feel safe? Or is that your assumption?
So he did say I was intimidated by you. That's the exact word that he used.
Did he explain what that word intimidation meant for him?
Yeah, I mean, good point. He didn't explain that, but I got the sense of saying that you have a background in healthcare, but you're an academic, you're a professor, and I don't feel safe to be myself. I can't be myself. So in this particular context.
Thank you. So can you go off camera one more time?
And bring my Sly photograph back.
Yes. So this time, I'd like you all to think about what you're observing, what you're sensing, what's coming up for you. What do you see happening in this situation? Hopefully we can give Nagesh some feedback about what we are observing, what we're sensing.
One of the things Nagesh mentioned about his background was the client. I don't recall if he said clearly, but like it's obvious he could have gone to my bio or wherever his information is found. And that actually struck me as a bit. I'm trying to think of the word I want. I mean, obviously it was excuse me, it was an assumption, but almost as if there was an irresponsibility from the client in not exercising his due diligence to find out about who his coach was.
Just wanting to build off of what Reggie said and wondering if it's going forward, if it's part of the contracting that Nagesh does or any of us do around having an initial session with a client partner around gelling, but also making sure they're aware of what we're bringing to the table as coaches, and if there's opportunity for that. And then not disagreeing with what Reggie said, but if that was what the client did, then why wasn't he upfront sooner about maybe what he uncovered or what made him uncomfortable.
I want to echo that as well. I put in the notes when Reggie mentioned that, it's like when you do the meet and greet, because sounds like you did the meet and greet. So, how was that disclosed, or how was that discussed? Because I mean, he would have known that Nagesh is a professor and in the healthcare background, and so maybe, yeah, I agree. I think something that can be done differently or added on to what already happens. And another thing that I observed was it's not, see, this is my implicit thought and bias. Like when Nagesh mentioned background, like I automatically went to like cultural background or racial background, things like that. But in this case, it sounds like it's more of a status or professional background situation. So yeah, and then what yeah, it's not something you can change, these backgrounds. So it's, yeah, during the meet and greet session, like let's just kind of unbox everything and say, okay, is this okay with you? Is this okay? Are we gonna, carry on a effective relationship or productive relationship? So yeah.
I'm sort of with everybody here in terms of this initial agreement or understanding. I think that that's where in coaching we start to build trust. And my sense is it's interesting because there's such a thing as a deference threshold in coaching, and especially I think in supervision, where you're often chosen as a coach because of your background, because of your expertise, but it's not necessary. But at the same time, and I've been in a situation where I have a legal background and I began a coaching relationship with an attorney who's a practicing much more experienced in the law than I am. And I felt a bit of, whoa, can I really measure up to this? And I'm wondering, in line with what all of you are saying, if putting that on the table in an effort to establish a partnership that could have been addressed and discussed and perhaps dispensed with from the very beginning. And we as coaches presenting ourselves as also human beings, even though we're coaches, that we're not above anyone, that we are vulnerable to and can actually be intimidated by the client. And from that place moving forward, so that the client understands, we are in partnership and not, because maybe, I don't know, maybe he's been intimidated by other professors or other situations in the past. But if we can distinguish ourselves and say that, establish with the client that we are, eye to eye, shoulder to shoulder with them in this process, that might help from the beginning. Anything else?
I think just to add to that, Sunny, just my experience, and I think when we did this last time, I brought a case around a certain individual, and I think as part of our intro session, a lot of it was finding that common ground so that that client had trust and felt safe, and that, before we had met, he had already checked me out. He found people who we knew in common, and he didn't share what they had said about me, but it made him more comfortable. And knowing that we had similar backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, and similar, connections. And so sometimes it's a real strength for our clients to have that information, to come into a space where they know that they have they have some basic information about their coach.
Can you join us again, Nikesh?
Thank you. Thank you so much. A quick clarifying question. Reginald, could you say a little bit more? You mentioned clients' irresponsibility. Did I hear about due diligence? Could you say a little bit more about that?
Sure. As a future care provider, this is the client. And I realize that as I unpack this for you in answering the question, it's from my own context, and that's, you know, knowing who your doctor is, essentially, or who your service provider is, if we place ourselves as coaches in that realm. So yeah, and irresponsible may be a strong word, but if you think of it in its context, you know, the prefix meaning not, so just not responsible doesn't make him bad. But that was the place from which I came in not only choosing that word, but also in placing, going back to what Sunni had mentioned earlier, if it's a partnership, then we each have a responsibility as we enter into the relationship. So hopefully that
Thank
helps.
you. No, it does help. Thank you so much. So if it's okay, there seems to be thread or threads across your reflections. And one thing I'm hearing strongly is the usefulness and importance of understanding common ground, understanding each other in a way that we are creating some trust as you go in to the coaching sessions, and that it is a partnership in terms of between the client and me, and so a lot of it is the initial work. And so, Reginald, like you're saying, one part of it is what the client needs to do, the other part of it is what I need to do in terms of having that conversation up front about it. I'll be honest, listening to you, I'm kind of pushed in two different directions. I really now understand and value the importance of having that initial conversation, especially in this context, in the healthcare context. It could be Sunny, like you said, a fellow attorney, or it could be somebody else. The other side of me, part of it is again cultural, coming from India, feels like I'm bragging by bringing that up, right? To say that work experience and what I bring matters. And so if coaching is where we coach irrespective of, what our academic background, what we bring or what we do, and maybe something to think about is say, yes, I think it's very important to bring it up, but how do we bring that a conversation that doesn't feel like, anyway, so, right. I mean, kind of the light's not on me, the light's on the client. So that's the kind of push and pull I'm sensing, though I hear you, right? Better upfront than finding it out, etc., and seeing, moving forward, what that is. So yeah, and I think Sylvia, you're right. Sometimes because we're BIPOC here, as we've talked about before, if I've got, clients or, white clients, I think about it more, saying that, what's my color doing in this conversation, and what do I bring, and how does that impact? This resident is white, but I really felt like this was much more about, status. And I think you're aware, but it's really unfortunate. The medical school context still to a large extent is a boot camp where the senior doctors, physicians think the way you teach is to put the student down. So the students come in, residents come in, saying that, oh, wow, I can't, anyway, I mean, you can't push and you can't challenge this person, etc., and so on. I'll reflect on the ways to do it, because I think the initial interaction conversation is useful. And again, to say, do I do this only with healthcare clients? Do I do it with all clients? Where does it matter? And where is it something where, the client feels like, oh, this is more about Nagesh than about me?
Hmm. How are you all about doing another round? Thumbs up? Anybody? Okay, Nagesh? This time, let's try something. Let's see whether we can contribute something to this situation in the form of a metaphor. Can you come up with a metaphor that describes what you see in Nagesh's situation with this client or any other client that he might encounter, especially around this tension that I'm hearing from him between, not bragging or chest thumping, and also establishing trust and how to do that. If you don't have a metaphor, just contribute whatever is coming up for you.
Well, I happen to love metaphors, so thank you, Sunni. The metaphor that comes up for me almost immediately is an iceberg, and just the unknown of what's below the surface, and taking the opportunity to explore what isn't initially seen.
I can share. I mean, I wasn't thinking in a metaphoric situation, but I think that's a very creative idea, Sunny. Since I love food, I want to just go with like food kind of thing. But what came up earlier to me was like, okay, well, Nagesh was feeling kind of hurt, kind of like, because his heart sank, right? So it was a kind of a little blow to his ego, maybe. I don't know. This never happened before. But then he also wants to really provide safe space and trusting space. So that's his intention. So share, your intention with the client in the beginning. And while whatever is happening, you got to take it not personally and just objectively, right? So in relation to food, like it's like you're a server, like you're serving the client this food, like your intention is for the client to enjoy the food, and be nourished. But if he or she or they don't like squash, well, then so be it, right? So instead of guessing that that person likes squash, like maybe, oh, do you like squash, or what do you not like, or what do you, kind of exploring likes and dislikes or wants and things like that. So that's my metaphor. I love food, so that I had to go with that. And being the service, like being the service mindset, right? Because I'm here to serve you. And like Nagesh said earlier, like the light is not on me, it's on the client. So what does that person want? And trying to get out of this situation.
The only metaphor I have right now ties to a book I'm reading called Braiding Sweetgrass. And just see, because Nagesh brought up a system, the health medical training system, and for some reason that when you braid anything, including sweetgrass, when you braid it, it makes it stronger. So the fibers wrap together and they make strength. So I see that if you're not bonding so much, but creating that strength between the coach and the client partner, that you're creating strength in that system that isn't always that strong. And to be able to do that, it takes an intertwining, and it takes sharing and the ability to see one another, if that makes sense. And I guess what I mean by that is you see all parts of each other. Not that you're sharing your innermost secrets, well, maybe the client is, but they need to have that trust to be able to do that. I haven't quite thought all of that through, but that's kind of where I'm at right now.
It's very interesting because I had this vision of Nagesh and his client standing on the shore and sort of just getting their toes wet in the sand and moving very slowly, inch by inch, deeper and deeper into the water and the waves coming up, and them being shoulder to shoulder, and Nagesh sort of allowing the client to lead, but we don't know whether Nagesh can swim, whether the client can swim, but they're both courageously inching into this coaching ocean. You know, that was what I was feeling and seeing. And as the water gets up to their ankles, and then, you know, slowly sort of beginning to learn about each other and what their strengths and capabilities, but they're shoulder to shoulder and sort of, you know, even holding hands, going into this unknown sort of moving territory. But that's the beginning of the relationship, the coaching relationship. And there's got to be some vulnerability. I think what's coming back and forth was this idea of being and doing, and the medical environment being so doing related that we as coaches in service, which is what Sylvie was talking about, have to help, you know, by being vulnerable ourselves, revealing our being, who we are, so that they can become more comfortable moving into the being and distinguishing ourselves from the doing people or the doing system and environment, which is, you know, very hierarchical. So, but I had this wade in the water kind of feeling. So, Gesh, can you come back and share with us where you are now?
I'm smiling with joy, and there's a positive energy in me because I love metaphors too, Reginald. So I'm happy that you asked that question. And so the metaphor that comes from me listening to the four of you is it feels like a quilt where the pieces that you're offering are different, but there's a thread. And maybe, Michelle, this is to your braiding in terms of what is the thread of trust? What is the thread of connection? What's the thread of vulnerability that brings what the four of you are sharing? Let me start from in reverse. I don't know how to swim. So Sunni, your metaphor of, you know, so what you're also saying is when the clients wants me to go somewhere, and this is maybe one where there isn't a fit, to say, I'm not the best person. If you want to swim in the deep, you probably want to find somebody who can take you, you know, to the deep. But, you know, I love the walking with the client or walking with the person. And I love the being versus doing, which, you know, you're so right in terms of how much time you spent on doing. The braiding, I love it. I didn't have, but I have long hair because of COVID. And my memories of my younger daughter, Suhani, my father had a full head of hair, when he died at 83. And she would sit and braid his hair when she was about 3 or 4. For me, as you said, Michelle, it's a certain pattern in what you do, but there's also a relationship, connection, love, when I think about that. So I feel like there's a powerful idea there, which is important. Oh, Sylvia, I love food, being of service. As you were talking, I felt like, is this also being kind of like a cook or a chef, right? You have a recipe that you follow in terms of what you do, but if you have a client who doesn't like squash, what do you put together and how do you put this together with the client, right? Which is really listening to saying, what do you like? And what kinds of things do you eat, not eat? What's your favorite, etc., and so on. So exploring the needs of the client vis-a-vis the food metaphor, which is again such a strong connector and a thread, I feel, is wonderful. And Reginald, I love the iceberg metaphor because you're right. There's so much unseen. And I was wondering as I was listening to you, one part of it feels like it's exploring what is not seen. I wonder if the other part is exploring what is seen, because the seen part, seems to, in this case, have created meanings, perceptions, and so on. But like you said, it comes with a whole layer of values that's below the water. So I'm trying to use the quilt, and in my mind, at least, I'm seeing a beautiful mosaic of things coming together that brings me joy, but also, really wonderful insights.
Okay, thank you so much, Nagesh. Thank you. Really. What I'd like to do is move to closing, and if each one of you can give briefly what your takeaway is from this session, what you might take away into your own coaching practice or into the future. What has been your gift from this session? And then we'll come back to you, Nagesh. Okay.
I have absolutely fallen in love with supervision because of just the different contexts that come together. And to Nagesh's quilt analogy, it's just so rich and Sylvia, nourishing, and Michelle, strengthening through the bond of partnership and stronger together. So that's what's, and I'm pausing only because I'm gathering myself. But this is, Nagesh had mentioned joy. This has been an extremely joyous time for me to come together with individuals I do not know, obviously with the exception of you, Sunni. And what can happen in such a short period of time with connection and sharing and bringing different thoughts and ideas together, that even though some can appear on its face at the opposite ends of the spectrum, they really are much closer. So that's my takeaway. That's a lot of takeaways, but that's it.
Thank you, Reggie.
So thank you.
I really enjoy this session because I'm taking away a lot for myself as well. I've been coaching just a few years. I still consider myself as a novice. And yeah, I'm really realizing exploration, really learning about what the client wants, what I intend to share, what I intend to offer. Just having that, discussion and exploration in the beginning is deeply important. So I'll definitely take that away, and apply in my practice. And yeah, there are some clients who's not gonna like my background or status or whatever. I'm a nurse myself, so some clients are nurses, and some clients are like directors, so yeah, the status doesn't really matter, but it does, right? So just acknowledging that, and what Nagesh said, the light is not on me, the light is on the client, and really exploring what the client wants. I think that's what I want to keep that in mind, and apply that in my practice. And don't take things personally, if the client doesn't like you for whatever you cannot change, right? So it is what it is, and go find somebody who can swim in the deep end. So
My appreciation, Nagesh, for sharing this with us today. And just appreciation to all of you, Sylvia, Reggie, and Sunny. Like you, Reggie, supervision has been so helpful. And I always learn something, and I love learning. And just appreciate all of you and all that you shared today. Yeah, the quilt, I really appreciate the quilt, Nagesh, and how that metaphor is going to stick with me. I'm going to sit with that for a while now. And yeah, thank you, Kukshan.
Wow, what can I say? All of you have contributed such richness, and I really appreciate that. I think the resounding theme for me is this issue of vulnerability and being vulnerable. And even I have issues around safe space, but I think the vulnerability is that which creates safe space. It's opposite of what most people think. And I'm very big on becoming comfortable with being uncomfortable. But that's where the growth and the magic happens, the bonding, the trust happens. All these things are possibilities when we open up, and allow things to happen without the judgment, without the systemic positioning and hierarchy and all this stuff. If in the coaching experience, we can shed a lot of that, is what makes it rich. So the sooner I can do that with the client, the better. I feel like we can move through those waters, and if they can't swim or I can't, we'll figure something out. As Nagesh said, we'll get someone else who can manage the deep end or teach us how to swim. We'll come up with something, but in a partnership kind of way. So I appreciate so much you bringing this, Nagesh. And we would just like to know now, where you are and if we've been able to be supportive. And thank you again for being vulnerable just by bringing it here.
No, thank you, Sunny, for inviting me. And as Reginald said, supervision, as we are talking about, is powerful. I know I'd mentioned last time that I had something, but when you mentioned at the beginning, I said, what was I thinking of? I don't remember, but the other piece of this, it felt vulnerable bringing it up, and I'm happy I did. Sylvia, you're so right. Sometimes I find it difficult to separate the personal from the issue. I feel like relationship and issues are all connected together, but it's so important to separate them because they're not always the same. The other piece is, you're right. I mean, since we're using, metaphors today, it feels like, we're weaving some magic. It's almost like a magical door has opened, on its own. It happened the way it did. It kind of, was flowing in directions it needed to. And that's been really powerful and joyful. And so thank you, Sylvia, Reginald, and Michelle, too, for your presence, energy, and your reflections.
Critical reflective process. Thank you all. And I will hope you have a wonderful day. Enjoy. I'm going to stop the recording now. Everyone, if there's someone who has an issue after I stop the recording, just let me know and we will address that issue.